Hi guys, so in this video we'll continue the discussion we had during the live stream flight from Reunion Island to Antananarivo about the 737 takeoff flap setting. Of course, you can imagine you cannot really take off with the flaps up as is at the moment. If you take off with the flaps up, you'll get the takeoff configuration warning. So we'll have a look at this. First of all, we'll release the parking brake, because if you try the takeoff config with the parking brake set, you're gonna get the config warning. So what I'll do is release the parking brake. Here it is, step on the brakes and try again the takeoff warning. Here it is, it sounds. So obviously flaps up is not like a takeoff flap setting. Then the next takeoff flap setting we can try is 1. So we'll select flaps 1. Takes a little bit of time for the flaps to get into position. And we should have a green light coming soon. Here it is. So if we tried the takeoff config warning by increasing the thrust, as you can see, there's no warning there. Just to show you as well about the takeoff config warning with the parking brake set, you see with flaps 1 we didn't have any warning, but if we try the takeoff config now, you see it sounds, so the parking brake triggers the takeoff config warning. It's not only the flaps, but it's also the parking brake and other things. Right, next we'll try the flap 2 setting. And here it is, it's in position. We'll release the parking brake. For some reason the light stays on, but it's maybe a little sim glitch. So we'll try takeoff config with flaps 2. It doesn't sound, so we could assume it is a takeoff flap setting. However, I'll get back on that one. Then we've got flaps 5. Once again, try with increasing the thrust. Flaps 5 is fine. Then we'll try flaps 10. Same thing. The takeoff config doesn't sound. Then we'll try flaps 15. Once again, it doesn't sound. Then we'll try flaps 25. Doesn't sound either. Then we'll try flap 30. And we know that flap 30 is not really a takeoff flap setting, but we should have the config warning here. And you can imagine flap 40 is also gonna trigger the takeoff config warning. Flap 30 and flap 40 of course are landing flap settings, not takeoff flap settings. So that's one way to kind of work out what the takeoff flap settings are. However, there is one exception, and I'll demonstrate that as we go along. So I'll retract a little bit of the flaps. All the way maybe back to up. And I'll set the parking brake. So another way to see it is in the takeoff ref page here, try to enter like a takeoff flap setting. So if you try to enter 0, it's gonna tell you invalid entry. If you try to enter 1, it's gonna take it. If you try to enter 5, it's gonna take it. 10, it's gonna take it. 15, the speed's unavailable for some reason, but it's still accepting it. and then 25 is good as well. 30 is gonna tell you invalid entry, and 40 of course is gonna be invalid entry as well. Right, so you must have noticed that I didn't try flaps 2. When we tried the takeoff config warning, flaps 2 didn't trigger the warning, so you could assume that it's a takeoff setting. If we try to put flaps 2 here, then it says invalid entry. So it considers it's not a takeoff flap setting. One last way to look at it is on the performance and the EFB. Go to the performance module and look at the flap config tab here, and you'll basically get all the takeoff flap settings. So flaps 1, flaps 5, flaps 10, flaps 15 and flaps 25. So there's a little bit of a trick here with the takeoff config warning, is that it doesn't sound with flaps 2, but flap 2 is not a takeoff flap setting configuration, so it could, if you were misselecting the flaps to flaps 2 and not checking it properly, you could take off with flaps 2 and not trigger the takeoff configuration warning. So that's something to bear in mind. So the config warning is not basically foolproof. What else do I want to say? I think that's pretty much it. So takeoff flap settings go from 1, we omit 2, then 5, 10, 15 and 25. When I used to fly the 737, as I said before, flaps 5 was used 98% of the time. Maybe a bit of flaps 1, maybe a flaps 15. I've never done takeoff with flaps 10, flaps 25. Flap 1 was a bit of an issue with the longer 737 and the possibility to hit the tail, you know, have a tail strike. So flaps 5 for the 737 is the most common takeoff flap setting, I would say. Cheers guys, we'll see you next time. Thank you very much. See you soon.